You walk into a room and something happens. Not because of what you say. You haven't said anything yet. Not because of how you're dressed or how you look or what your title is. None of that has been established. Something happens simply because of how you move through the space, how you occupy it, how you relate to it, and in the first 7 seconds, before a single word has been exchanged, every person in that room has already begun forming a judgment about whether you are someone to take seriously. This is not a theory. This is neuroscience. The human brain makes status assessments faster than conscious thought can intervene. Before you've introduced yourself, before you've demonstrated competence, before you've said anything worth remembering, the brain of every person in that room has already run a calculation based entirely on nonverbal data and delivered a verdict. High value or low value, confident or uncertain. Someone who commands space or someone who apologizes for taking it. And here's the part that should fundamentally change how you think about presence, influence, and respect. Most people are failing that assessment before they open their mouth. Not because they lack intelligence. Not because they lack skill or accomplishment or genuine worth. But because the signals their body is broadcasting are undermining everything their words are trying to build. They speak well but move apologetically. They have strong ideas but hold eye contact like it's something they're borrowing. They say the right things and then immediately soften them with a laugh or a qualification that erases the authority they just created. They are working twice as hard for half the result. Because the verbal channel and the nonverbal channel are sending different messages. And when those two channels conflict, people don't believe the words. They believe the body. Every time. Here's what no one tells you about respect. You cannot argue your way into it. You cannot explain your way into it. You cannot be articulate enough or accomplished enough to override the signal your physiology is broadcasting in real time. Respect is not a conclusion people reach after evaluating your credentials. It is a feeling they have in your presence. And feelings are produced by behavior. Specific, observable, replicable behavior. Long before logic has a chance to weigh in. There are 5 specific behaviors. Precise, nonverbal, immediately actionable, that produce the feeling of respect in the people around you. Not over time, not after a track record is established. Instantly, in the first moments of any interaction. These behaviors work not because they're tricks or performances, but because they communicate something real and rare at a biological level. Something that the human social brain has been calibrated to recognize and respond to for thousands of years. Once you understand what they are and why they work, you will never walk into a room the same way again. The first behavior is the one that changes everything before you've done anything else, the quality of your stillness. Most people are in constant low-level motion, a shifting of weight, a touching of the face, a glancing around the room, a readjusting of posture every 30 seconds. Small movements, individually meaningless, but collectively broadcasting something the social brain reads with extraordinary precision. Anxiety. Not always dramatic anxiety, not panic, but the low-grade physiological restlessness that the nervous system produces when it doesn't feel entirely safe in its environment. When it's scanning for threat, when it's uncertain about its position. And here's the critical thing to understand. The people around you are reading that restlessness. Not consciously, not analytically, but their social brain is processing it in real time and drawing a conclusion. This person is not fully at ease here. And if they're not at ease, there may be a reason. And if there's a reason, they may not be as secure in their position as they'd like to appear. That conclusion happens in milliseconds, before you've spoken, before you've done anything deliberate. The micro-movement has already done its work. Now compare that to stillness. Real stillness, not rigidity. That communicates a different kind of tension. But the easy, settled quality of someone who has no particular need to move. Who occupies their space without negotiating with it. Who stands or sits with a groundedness that signals something very specific to the social brain. This person is comfortable here, which means they belong here, which means they are someone whose presence is established rather than earned. Here is the neuroscience that explains why this works so powerfully. High-status individuals across virtually every social species display less unnecessary movement than lower-status individuals. The alpha animal moves deliberately and economically. It does not fidget. It does not scan anxiously. It does not adjust constantly. Its stillness is a broadcast. I am not looking for threat because I am not concerned about threat. And that broadcast is received by every other animal in the proximity as a status signal. The human social brain runs the same algorithm. Stillness reads as security. Security reads as status. Status produces respect. The chain is automatic, and it runs beneath the threshold of conscious thought in everyone you encounter. Here's what this looks like in practice. When you enter a space, resist the impulse to immediately look around, touch your phone, adjust your clothing, or find something to do with your hands. Instead, arrive. Simply arrive. Stand where you are and let the room come to you rather than chasing it with your attention. When you sit, sit completely, not perched on the edge of the chair as though you might need to leave quickly, but settled, occupying the chair like you chose it deliberately. When you're in conversation, keep your head movements minimal and intentional. Let your hands rest rather than illustrating every word. The difference this makes in how you're perceived is not subtle. It is dramatic, and it happens without a single word being spoken. Begin with this. Everything else builds on it. Because stillness is the foundation of every other signal this list will teach you. You cannot project calm authority while your body is broadcasting restlessness. The stillness has to come first. And when it does, the room notices, not loudly, in the way that matters, in the way that changes how people position themselves in relation to you before the conversation has even begun. The second behavior is the one that most people get exactly backwards, the pace at which you respond. There is a direct, measurable relationship between how quickly you respond to social pressure and how much authority you're perceived to have. And almost everyone is responding too fast. Here's what happens when someone speaks to you and you respond immediately. The speed of your response, however well-intentioned, sends a signal. It signals that their input required immediate processing, that you were waiting to respond, that the interaction has a kind of urgency for you. And urgency, in the context of social positioning, reads as need, and need reads as lower status. This is not a criticism. It is a description of how the social brain processes timing. The person who responds immediately is, at a neurological level, being read as someone for whom the interaction is important enough to prioritize in real time. And that prioritization, while it might feel like engagement or enthusiasm, lands as something else, reactivity. Now compare that to a deliberate pause. Someone speaks. You receive what they've said, and before responding, you allow a genuine moment of processing, not a performance of thinking that's obvious and counterproductive. A real pause. The pause of someone who doesn't feel pressure to fill silence, who is comfortable with the moment stretching, who responds when they're ready rather than when the social pressure to respond peaks. That pause does something remarkable. It shifts the frame of the entire interaction. Because the person who is comfortable with silence, who doesn't rush to fill it, who doesn't appear to feel the pressure of it, is communicating something at a level deeper than words. I am not in a hurry to satisfy your expectations of me. That message, received non-verbally, is one of the most powerful status signals available to you. Because urgency to respond is associated with lower status across virtually every social context. The person being interviewed responds quickly. They're being evaluated. The person conducting the interview takes their time. They're doing the evaluating. The applicant fills silence. The decision maker is comfortable with it. These are not arbitrary cultural conventions. They are reflections of a deep social logic that the brain applies automatically to every interaction it processes. Here's the practical application. In conversation, after someone finishes speaking, give yourself 1 to 3 seconds before beginning your response. Not 5 seconds. That becomes theatrical. 1 to 3, a genuine beat. Long enough to signal that you're choosing your response rather than reacting to the prompt. Long enough to shift the perceived dynamic of the interaction without making the pause itself the subject of attention. In higher stakes interactions, negotiations, interviews, confrontations, moments where someone is testing your reaction, extend that pause. Make it deliberate. Make it comfortable. Let the silence exist long enough that the other person has to decide whether to fill it. Because the person who fills the silence first is, almost universally, the one who needed it resolved more urgently. And urgency, as you now understand, is the tell. There is also a second dimension to this behavior that operates in written communication, in digital contexts, in any situation where you have a choice about how quickly to respond. The person who responds to every message within seconds is communicating involuntarily that they were waiting, that the response was the priority, that the interaction ranked high enough to interrupt whatever else was happening. That communication is not always wrong, but it should be a choice, not a default. And when you make it a deliberate choice rather than a reflex, something shifts in how you're perceived across every channel of communication you use. Slow down. Let the pause work for you. It is doing more than you know. The third behavior is the most misunderstood element of human presence, and getting it right changes every interaction you will ever have: the way you use your eyes. Eye contact is not binary. It is not simply present or absent. It exists on a spectrum of quality, intention, and comfort, and where you fall on that spectrum communicates your relationship to confidence, to the person in front of you, and to your own sense of authority more clearly than almost any other signal your body produces. Most people have a broken relationship with eye contact. They make it briefly and then look away. Not because they're being evasive, but because sustained eye contact produces a mild physiological discomfort that their nervous system resolves by breaking the contact. This is the default. And like most defaults, it works against the perception you're trying to create. Here's what the breaking of eye contact communicates. At a primitive social level, it communicates submission. The one who looks away first, in virtually every species that uses visual dominance displays, is signaling that they are not contesting the position of the other. In humans, this has been filtered through millennia of social complexity and no longer means what it meant for our ancestors. But the brain still runs the old algorithm, still registers the break, still updates its assessment of status based on who maintained and who yielded. The person who yields more is read, automatically and consistently, as having less authority. Now here is what genuine, comfortable eye contact communicates. Not the forced, unblinking stare of someone performing dominance that reads as aggression or instability, not confidence. But the easy, interested, unflinching contact of someone who is fully present with you without needing to look away to manage their own discomfort. This reads as security, as interest that doesn't require management, as the presence of someone who is completely at ease with the intensity of being seen and being in direct connection with another person. That ease is extraordinarily rare, and rare things attract disproportionate attention and respect. Here is the specific technique that produces this quality of eye contact without it feeling forced or theatrical. Focus on one eye at a time rather than trying to maintain contact with both simultaneously. Most people, when they try to hold eye contact, make the mistake of attempting to look at both eyes at once, which creates a slightly unfocused, glassy quality that reads as vacant rather than present. Choose one eye, typically the left eye of the person you're speaking to, which connects to the right hemisphere of their brain and is associated with emotional processing, and engage with that one specifically. The contact becomes more precise, more genuine, and more comfortable for both parties. There is also a critical distinction between listening eye contact and speaking eye contact. When you are listening, maintain eye contact at a higher rate, around 70 to 80%. This signals engagement, attention, genuine interest. When you are speaking, it is both natural and strategic to look away occasionally, not to break contact from discomfort, but to signal that you are accessing your own thoughts rather than reading their reaction. The person who looks away while speaking and returns to eye contact when making a key point uses their gaze as punctuation. Each return to contact emphasizes the statement it accompanies. Used this way, eye contact stops being something you maintain and starts being something you deploy. And the difference between those two relationships with your own gaze is the difference between someone who appears to be trying to hold attention and someone who commands it without effort. The fourth behavior is the one that produces the most immediate, visceral shift in how you are perceived by every person in any room: the deliberate use of space. Most people contract, not dramatically, not in a way they're aware of, but consistently. They make themselves slightly smaller than the space they're in. Shoulders that angle inward rather than resting open. Arms that stay close to the body. Legs that cross or fold rather than extending. A physical presence that is apologetic, that communicates without words, "I will take only what I need, and I'm sorry for even that." This contraction is usually a response to the social pressure of unfamiliar or high-stakes environments. The nervous system, registering uncertainty, defaults to a physically smaller profile as a form of social appeasement. Making yourself smaller signals that you're not a threat, that you're not contesting space, that you're deferring to the room rather than claiming it. And the room reads that signal and adjusts its assessment of you accordingly. Here's the behavioral pattern of people who command immediate respect in any environment. They expand, not aggressively. That reads as performance or compensation, but naturally. With the ease of someone who has never questioned their right to occupy space, they sit with their shoulders open rather than rolled forward. They stand with their feet at shoulder width rather than pressed together. They place objects, a bag, a notebook, a phone, in a way that establishes territory rather than consolidating into the smallest possible footprint. And the space they occupy becomes associated with them. The room organizes itself slightly around their presence rather than the other way around. Here's why this works at a biological level. Expansive posture triggers a specific neurological response in observers. Research from Harvard's Social Cognition Lab has demonstrated that postural expansion is consistently associated with perceived power, competence, and leadership, both in the person adopting the posture and in those observing it. The observer's brain runs an automatic assessment. This person is claiming space. Claiming space requires a certain level of confidence about one's right to do so. Therefore, this person has that confidence. Therefore, they merit a certain level of deference. That entire chain runs automatically. In the time it takes to cross a room, here's what to adjust immediately. When you sit, use the full back of the chair. Don't perch. Don't lean forward anxiously. Let your back meet the seat fully, and let your arms rest in a way that claims the armrests if they're there, or rests comfortably open on the table if you're at one. When you stand, check your shoulder position. Not pulled back in a forced military posture, but released and open rather than curled forward. Check your feet, together or crossed, signals a desire to take up less room. Shoulder width or slightly beyond signals settledness. There is also a temporal dimension to this behavior that most people miss entirely. The speed at which you move through a space is itself a claim. People who move quickly through a space are broadcasting that they don't entirely own it, that they're passing through rather than inhabiting it. People who move at a deliberate, unhurried pace through the same space are broadcasting the opposite, that this space is available to them, that they're not in a hurry to get through it because they're comfortable in it. Slow down when you move through rooms, especially unfamiliar ones, especially high-stakes ones. The instinct will be to move faster, to get through the discomfort of being observed and unestablished as quickly as possible. Override that instinct. Move at the pace of someone who has been here before, because that pace is what the room responds to. The fifth behavior is the one that ties all the others together, and it's the most counterintuitive thing on this entire list: the willingness to be comfortable with disapproval. Everything we've discussed so far, the stillness, the pace, the eye contact, the use of space, all of it is built on a foundation. And that foundation is not technique. It is not skill. It is not practice. It is a specific internal orientation that either makes all the other behaviors feel natural or makes them feel like a performance that eventually collapses under pressure. That orientation is this: being genuinely okay with the possibility that not everyone in the room will approve of you. Here's why this is the foundation of everything else. Every behavior that undermines presence and respect, the fidgeting, the rushed response, the broken eye contact, the physical contraction, every single one of those behaviors has the same root cause: the need to manage how you're being perceived, the anxiety about whether the room is receiving you positively, the monitoring of social signals for evidence of approval or disapproval, and the adjustments, the corrections, the softening, the qualifying that happen in real time as the monitoring produces data. That entire cycle is what destroys presence, because presence requires full attention directed outward. And the approval monitoring cycle redirects massive amounts of attention inward. You are simultaneously trying to engage with the room and trying to manage how the room sees you. And those two tasks compete for the same cognitive and physiological resources. The result is a person who appears to be partially elsewhere, partially inside their own head, partially managing something that nobody else can see but everybody can feel. And that quality, the quality of someone running an internal management system rather than being fully present, is what reads as low confidence, not the content of what they say, not their credentials. The internal management system that their body broadcasts, despite their best efforts to conceal it. Here's the shift that changes everything. Stop trying to conceal the management system. Dismantle it. And the way you dismantle it is by genuinely, not performatively, not through a mental trick, but genuinely arriving at a place where you understand that disapproval is survivable. That not everyone in the room needs to like you for you to have full access to your own capability. That the person in the corner who is unimpressed is not a problem to be solved. They are data to be accepted and moved past. When you truly reach that place, the management system goes quiet. And when it goes quiet, everything else on this list stops being effortful and starts being natural. The stillness stops requiring maintenance because you're no longer managing micro-expressions of anxiety. The pace stops requiring discipline because you're no longer rushing to resolve the discomfort of potential disapproval. The eye contact stops requiring courage because there's no longer anything threatening about being fully seen. The use of space stops requiring a reminder because a person who is comfortable with disapproval is also, naturally, comfortable taking up room. Everything flows from this. Here is how you begin to develop this orientation practically. Not through affirmation. Not through telling yourself that you don't care what people think. That is a performance that fools no one, least of all yourself. But through a specific cognitive reframe that you apply in the moments when the approval monitoring system activates most strongly. The reframe is this. When you feel the pull to adjust, soften, qualify, or contract in response to social pressure, ask yourself one question. Would the version of me I most respect do this? Not the version that everyone approves of. The version you most respect. The one that operates from values rather than validation. The one that has a clear enough sense of its own position that it doesn't need the room to confirm it. That question interrupts the management cycle at its most critical moment. And over time, asking it repeatedly in the moments of highest social pressure begins to produce a new default, a baseline orientation of security that doesn't require constant maintenance. That simply exists. That the room feels when you enter it, before you've said a word, before you've demonstrated anything. Just by how you carry yourself through the space, just by the quality of your stillness, just by the ease with which you take up your own room in the world. Here is what all 5 behaviors share, beneath the technique, beneath the neuroscience, beneath the specific instructions. They are all expressions of the same internal state, the state of someone who has located their value in themselves rather than in the room's reaction to them. Someone who is not performing confidence but inhabiting it. Someone whose presence is not a production but a condition. And here is the deepest truth in all of this. Respect is not something you earn through behavior. It is something people feel in the presence of someone who has stopped needing it. Because the moment you stop needing respect from the room, the management system goes quiet, the presence becomes real, and the room, without any effort on your part, begins to give you what you stopped chasing. This is the paradox that most people never reach. Because they spend their entire lives trying to earn respect through performance. Better words, better arguments, better credentials, better presentation. And none of it creates the feeling that genuine presence creates. Because performance is visible, and visible effort signals that the position it's defending is not fully secure. Security doesn't perform, it simply is. And when it simply is, in a room full of people running their own approval monitoring systems and trying to manage their own perceived position, it stands out with a clarity that requires no introduction and no explanation. You walk in. You're still. You take your time. You hold the eye contact. You claim your space. You make peace with the possibility that not everyone will approve. And something happens. Not because of what you say. You haven't said anything yet. Because of what you are in the room. What you signal before the words arrive. What the social brain of every person present has already decided about you in the first 7 seconds. The question is not, how do I make people respect me? The real question, the one that changes how you prepare for every room you enter, every interaction you choose to show up fully for, is this. What would it feel like to walk in already knowing that my presence is enough? Because the day you find that feeling and decide it's not arrogance but accuracy is the day the room starts to feel it too. And you won't have to say a word.